I am Eliza, 34 years old. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, they would eventually see my effort and choose to keep me. But then I received a board meeting invitation. Savannah was listed as the lead presenter on a strategy draft, originally written in my handwriting. Everyone needs to get used to not being the center anymore. And I understood real worth doesn't need to be acknowledged, only protected enough so it can't be erased. Some absences speak louder when no one notices them. I ran the wooden comb through my hair without urgency. The teeth snagged once near the base of my neck, catching on a strand I didn't bother to untangle. The comb was worn smooth from years of use. One tooth chipped the handle slightly darker, where my thumb always rested. My mother gave it to me when I turned 16, wrapped in tissue and sealed with a red sticker from a grocery flyer. Every woman needs something of her own, she'd told me. I hadn't asked what she'd meant by something. The mirror in my room tilted slightly backward, as if it refused to meet anyone's gaze directly. I adjusted the neckline of my navy dress. It had a faded spot near the hem, small enough to miss if I didn't point it out, which I never had. The sleeves still fit clean at the shoulders, though one cuff had begun to lose its stitching. I checked my phone. There was no email from Savannah, no digital invitation. Nothing in my mailbox either, unless the promotional flyer for carpet cleaning was her idea of ceremony. The last time I'd heard from her was when she tagged me in a photo. I wasn't in a throwback to our childhood summers, featuring only her kneeling beside a lemonade stand I'd built from scrap wood. The group thread named Bennett Family had gone silent since January. Before that, just a forwarded meme and a prayer hand emoji from Aunt Lydia. I scrolled again slowly as if maybe the message would appear out of nothing. It didn't. My phone buzzed. "See you tonight. Excited for Savannah's rooftop thing, Megan." She had worked with me during the early days of the Larchmont campaign, back when Savannah was still adjusting to public praise. Megan had always been kind, quick with a joke, never one to notice the undercurrents. I stared at the message a long time. My thumb hovered, but I didn't reply. Opening Instagram, I found the story on Savannah's firm account. A looped boomerang string lights over a rooftop terrace, champagne flutes lined on a table, a blurred silhouette adjusting a mic stand. The caption read, "Celebrating Leadership the Bennett Way." Below it, a hashtag, #Savannah Rising. There were already replies from mutual contacts. "Can't wait. So proud of you. A true Bennett woman." I looked down at my lap. My phone screen dimmed. From the bookshelf, I pulled down a shallow box lined in navy velvet. Inside, a wedding invitation Savannah had mailed me years ago by accident. The envelope was addressed to someone else, but the inner card bore the guest list. Aunt Louise's name was embossed in silver foil, though she'd passed 3 years earlier. Mine wasn't there. It never had been. Behind the invitation was a folded receipt catering deposit paid by my credit card. They had forgotten to remove my billing information from the planning document. No one ever mentioned it. I never reminded them. The edges of the card had curled slightly. I slid it back into the box and closed the lid without snapping it shut. I walked to the closet, opened the drawer I rarely touched, and took out a small package wrapped in brown craft paper and twine. Inside was a brass fountain pen that had once belonged to our grandfather. I'd kept it polished, even changed the ink bladder last winter. Savannah didn't write anything by hand. She dictated or delegated. I had planned to give her the pen anyway, not because she'd use it, because it came from someone neither of us could steal from. My purse sat where I'd left it the night before, beside the radiator beneath the soft hum of heat. I slipped the package inside and zipped it halfway. The mirror caught my reflection again as I walked past. I didn't stop to look. Just enough to confirm that I was still there, that my shape hadn't dissolved. The phone buzzed once more, a message from my mother. "If you're coming, don't start anything." I let the screen go dark. No reply, no deletion. I reached for the only ring I wore, thin silver, slightly bent, a gift from a retired Air Force captain the week I left active duty. "For when you need to remember who you are," she'd said. I didn't remember her name, only her hand, calloused but kind. I slid the ring on my finger, then tightened the strap of my purse. The elevator to Savannah's building required a guest code. I searched for the firm's online listing and clicked through until I found the address. The RSVP was public, the venue tagged. I wasn't on the list, but the building didn't know that. Algorithms don't question presence. I left the apartment without checking the time. Outside, the wind carried a sharpness that crept beneath my sleeves. The train arrived 2 minutes after I reached the platform. No one looked up as I boarded. Half an hour later, I stood across the street from the venue, watching people move through glass doors like they belonged there. My phone buzzed again. Megan once more, grab a drink with me after speeches. No greeting, no mention, just assumption. I crossed the street. The lobby smelled of polished stone and expensive soap. A security guard nodded as I walked past. I didn't smile. In the elevator, I watched the numbers rise. I imagined the rooftop, the lights, the laughter the camera held mid-air for Savannah's next highlight reel. I imagined the corners where no one would notice me standing. I imagined the air tasting of rosé and too much applause. I looked down at my shoes, black leather, slightly creased. I had bought them during a clearance sale, never worn them more than 3 hours at a time. They still held their shape. The elevator dinged. I didn't step out. My reflection in the metal door stared back, blurred but intact. Maybe they forgot. I wasn't going to make a scene. But forgetting someone doesn't mean they're gone. Sometimes the effort to belong wears the same face as surrender. When I first left the service, I moved into a rented duplex 6 miles from my mother's house. It had peeling siding and a back porch that leaned toward the fence like it was tired of standing. I picked it because the mailbox wasn't broken, and the previous tenant had left behind a kettle that whistled unevenly. I kept it. Every other Thursday, I drove my mother to her clinic in Bellevue. She never offered to split gas, never asked if the timing worked. She'd climb in, adjust the vents without speaking, and keep one gloved hand pressed over the edge of her purse like someone might take it. I didn't mind. I kept mints in the glove box and played public radio at a low volume. She never acknowledged it. Once in late March, we passed a coffee stand with painted daffodils on the window. She glanced sideways, then said, flat and slow, "Your sister never makes me wait. She uses the express lane." I nodded and turned onto the freeway. Later that week, I mailed Savannah a short essay I'd written for a military publication, the kind of reflection they print between op-eds and award citations. It was about the cost of silence during field deployments and how stillness can be both armor and cage. She didn't reply, but I saw the phrasing reappear 3 months later in a keynote she gave at a branding conference. "Stillness is the most powerful frame," she said on stage, smiling with the practiced warmth of someone who never had to repeat herself. I watched the clip on mute. That summer, I organized our mother's birthday, a quiet brunch at a garden cafe she once liked, table for 6. I called ahead, ordered the lemon scones, even brought the folding cane she refused to use, but always reached for by dessert. Savannah arrived 40 minutes late with a paper box from a downtown bakery and a new silk scarf. Everyone stood when she walked in. The waiter offered to reheat the tea. Someone posted a photo afterward, our mother holding the bakery box like a gift, the scarf draped over her shoulder. The caption read, "Savannah always knows how to make things special." I wasn't in the frame. I had taken the picture. There was a time I thought effort earned space, that if I filled in enough of the gaps, eventually someone would notice the shape I left behind. I still have the printed version of Savannah's first promotion speech. Draft 7 marked in red ink that smudged near the margins. She emailed it to me late one night with the subject line, "Help no greeting," no punctuation. I rewrote entire paragraphs, restructured the closing, tightened her transitions. I remember trimming a story about our father to make space for one about market trust cycles. She didn't notice the swap. At the actual event, she stood in front of 300 people and thanked her team. She held up a framed quote and told the room, "This came from my late-night brainstorms. I always think best when I'm on my own." I didn't clap. I kept my hands folded in my lap, one thumb tracing a small tear in the program booklet. It had split near the spine, just enough to leave a jagged edge. Afterward, she walked past me in the lobby. Her perfume smelled different. "Don't forget to send me those edits next time," she said without stopping. I looked down at the speech draft, still folded in my purse. It had a coffee ring in the corner and my handwriting in 5 places. She never asked for it back. The kitchen drawer in my apartment used to hold thank you cards. I bought them in sets of 12 soft grey with gold-foiled corners. Over the years, I'd written out more than 2 dozen. Only 3 were ever mailed. The rest stayed in the drawer, unsent, unsigned. Sometimes I reread them, not for what I wrote, but for what I didn't. There's a manila folder tucked at the back of my filing cabinet labeled Events. It holds invitations to things I planned but didn't host, and things I attended but wasn't included in. Savannah's engagement announcement, printed in a trifold layout professionally styled. The gala program where my name was misspelled under contributing editors. A charity auction ticket I paid for twice. A Christmas card from our mother, addressed to my girls but only signed under Savannah's name. One night, I sat at the table and spread them all out in rows, paper on paper, stacked by year. The earliest was from college, a banquet she RSVP'd to on my behalf, then sent a roommate instead. The most recent was a printed menu from a tasting event I'd sourced vendors for. My name wasn't on the sponsor list. It never had been. I collected the pile, slowly slipping each one into a shoebox I hadn't used since the Air Force. The lid didn't close easily. Some corners bent. The last item I placed inside was a photo from our mother's birthday brunch. It had been mailed by mistake, one of those automated prints from a family member who didn't realize I wasn't in the loop. In the image, Savannah's scarf is caught mid-flutter, our mother's eyes tilted toward the lemon box, her mouth frozen mid-smile. You could almost believe it was a moment. Almost. I sealed the box with a strip of masking tape and wrote nothing on the lid. There was no need. I'd remember what it didn't hold. I used to think that helping enough would make me visible. I just hadn't realized that some kinds of effort are designed to disappear. I used to think photographs were proof that I was there, that I mattered, even when no one remembered. The padded envelope sat on the counter for 2 days before I opened it. The label said, E. Bennett, written in the familiar cursive of my mother's hand. But inside, it wasn't for me. A photo album wrapped in floral paper and tied with a silver ribbon. The kind of effort Mom usually reserved for birthdays and holidays, not random Tuesdays in March. There was no card, just a sticky note on the plastic. For Savannah, these are the ones you asked for. I peeled back the ribbon. The pages crinkled like they hadn't been opened in years. Each photograph was carefully arranged with corners tucked neatly into their slots, captions written in ink that had started to fade. The first was from a birthday. My 12th, maybe. I recognized the cake vanilla with pale green icing, the kind I used to scrape off. In the picture, I stood next to the piano in our living room. Straight-backed, hands clasped. My party dress looked too stiff. Everyone else was smiling at something off-camera. I wasn't. A note underneath in blue ink, Savannah playing for guests after dinner. But that wasn't true. Savannah had left early that evening for a sleepover. She didn't touch the piano. I remembered because I practiced that piece for weeks, and no one clapped when I finished. I turned the page. A graduation photo. My cap slightly tilted, boots polished, the West Point seal just barely visible in the background. Mom had insisted on a quick picture before I boarded the shuttle. Her face unreadable, one hand gripping her purse strap like it was the only thing keeping her there. The caption, Eliza's graduation. Just us Savannah had work. No punctuation. Like it was an afterthought. Another page. A camping trip. I knew the spot well near Lake Harris just off the Fire Road. I'd picked it because Savannah liked flat trails. I packed the cooler, loaded the car, and reserved the permits. I even repaired the broken zipper on Mom's sleeping bag. The photo showed Savannah holding a lantern at dusk. Her hair caught the orange glow like it was staged. In the background, the tent I pitched, the fire I built. Caption, Savannah led the trip. So proud of her. I closed the book for a moment and rested my hand on the cover. The embossed border scratched slightly against my palm, the kind of cheap leather that cracks in the corners over time. I flipped to the last page. A family Christmas. The year I came home from Afghanistan. I had wrapped gifts in butcher paper with twine bows because I didn't have time to shop. I remembered Savannah laughing at how Pinterest it looked. The photo was framed tightly. Mom, Dad, Savannah, and the tree. I wasn't in it. The note at the bottom. Our girls, Christmas Eve. There was a silence in my chest that didn't demand anything. No defense, no retelling, just space hollow and exact. I traced the edge of a page. It had yellowed slightly where glue met plastic. I thought about the times I'd offered to scan these to preserve them digitally. Too technical. Mom waved me off once. Let Savannah handle the stories. I remembered a moment, Thanksgiving maybe 3 years ago. I had brought dessert, a cranberry tart from that little bakery near the base. When I set it on the table, Mom asked if I brought a backup in case Savannah's pie didn't set. Another at a fundraiser. Savannah introduced me as my sister, the one who does the army stuff. Someone laughed. I nodded. I pressed the album shut. The pages sighed together. My eyes fell on a single strip of photo booth prints tucked behind the last page. 4 tiny frames. Savannah in all of them making faces, tossing her hair. No second person in the frame. But I remembered being there. I was holding the camera. She hadn't wanted to wait in line. I crouched and clicked the shutter from the outside. There was no caption. I picked up a pen from the counter. The ink was nearly dry. I wrote slowly, each letter careful. Not mine. Then I stuck the note to the front of the album and placed it gently back in the envelope. The ribbon stayed off. No return address. No follow-up message. Just one more thing sent to the wrong name, filled with the wrong history, written in someone else's ink. I didn't call. There was nothing to correct. I sat for a while watching the album, its spine arched slightly where too many memories had been crammed too tightly. That evening I made tea. The mug was chipped at the rim, a gift from a unit mate long retired. the teabag tag curled upward like it wanted to be read. I left it untouched. The album remained sealed, and I realized maybe it was never really open to begin with. Sometimes silence says exactly what I wasn't brave enough to name. I had pressed the collar of the navy blouse 3 times before folding it into my bag. It wasn't new, not even particularly flattering, but the stitching reminded me of a uniform. Something about the seams gave me order, a direction. I carried a small box wrapped in parchment-colored paper. Inside was a pen, set with my initials engraved, small and discreet. Not Savannah's initials, mine. I wasn't sure if that was defiance or a habit. No one looked up when I arrived. The rooftop had been strung with minimalist white lights, the kind that make everything feel curated but distant. Glass walls framed the skyline. People stood in loose circles, laughter rising in controlled bursts like fireworks on delay. Savannah was near the center. Her blazer was crisp. Her voice lifted just above the music. Someone touched her elbow as if she were something precious. I waited until she turned slightly, then stepped forward, the gift still in my hands. She didn't pause. She didn't blink. Her fingers tightened around the soda glass in her hand. Not champagne, not wine, just pale amber soda with a twist of lime floating at the top. She raised it slowly, then tilted it forward. A single, deliberate pour down the front of my blouse. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the lights seemed to flicker. I didn't move. My blouse clung to my skin, the fabric growing darker along the hem. The pen box remained in my hand. I didn't loosen my grip. Behind her, someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another, louder voice, catering, Savannah, didn't correct them. She stepped back half a pace. Then came the voice that used to wake me for school, that once tucked notes into my lunch. "Don't let her ruin your night, honey." My mother brushed past me, patting Savannah's arm with a napkin. She didn't glance at my shirt. She does this. Always finds a way to make it about her. I watched a bead of soda drip from my sleeve onto the marble tile. 1, 2, 3. Then a shift. Small, barely audible. The soft tread of leather shoes. A white linen handkerchief held out, folded sharply like something from another decade. Damon. He didn't speak. His eyes didn't search mine. He offered the cloth and stood beside me, not in front, not as protector, but as presence. The pen box was still in my hand. The wrapping had absorbed a small corner of moisture. I placed it gently on the nearest table. No one reached for it. Megan, once a roommate, then a stranger, looked toward me with a half frown. "She's not on the list," someone muttered behind her. I remembered the list. I remembered the email I never received. I wiped my hands without urgency. Soda smells faintly like childhood if you don't look too hard. Elaine stepped closer, still not facing me. "This isn't the place. You need to leave now," I heard myself respond, but only in thought. This was never the place. Not for me. A man in a grey suit laughed nervously. I didn't know Savannah had a sister. A woman leaned closer to him. "Maybe she doesn't. You know how these things go." Savannah picked up another drink and turned away. Her voice returned to its practiced rhythm, animated, polished. I remembered that tone from her campaign speeches in high school, the ones I edited, the ones she forgot to credit. I didn't look for a towel. I didn't explain. I didn't ask who told the bartender I wasn't a guest. I took one last glance at the skyline. The glass walls reflected everything, except me. Damon placed the handkerchief in my palm. It was still warm from his hand. No one clapped. No one gasped. That was the cruelty of it. Clean, quiet. I didn't drop the cloth. I didn't crumple it. I folded it slowly, creasing it as if it were a document to be filed. A ceremony, quiet and final. My mother's hand was still on Savannah's shoulder. Her fingers now still rested just below the collarbone, the way you press a dress flat before sewing it shut. I thought of the framed photo above the piano at home, Savannah in uniform, though she never wore one. The day I left for deployment, there were no cameras. Someone clinked a fork against a glass. A toast was beginning. I stepped back, not to retreat, just enough not to block the light. I left the gift on the table. The soda stain had bloomed across the bottom like a bruise. No one noticed. I stood in the silence, not apart from it, but inside it. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. There are moments when absence becomes visible, not because anyone mentions it, but because it no longer tries to be hidden. And I understood without doubt or question that I was never meant to belong. Some kinds of noise never reach the ears, but they stay in the body. The scent of soda had faded from my blouse, but the cloth held the shape of that moment. I didn't hang it to dry. I laid it flat on the chair by the shower, buttons open, sleeves curled inward like the body was still inside. The steam filled the room and wrapped itself around the mirror. I didn't wipe it. I let it stay blurred. I stood under the water long enough to lose the sense of time. It wasn't about rinsing anything away. It was the quiet between the droplets that made things clearer. The tile beneath my feet had a crack I hadn't noticed before, thin, jagged, like something hairline and permanent. After drying off, I pulled out the drawer where I kept things I no longer needed but hadn't thrown away. On top was the email from months ago, printed and folded in thirds. The paper had softened from being read, but the message stayed sharp. Don't come again unless you're ready to stop making everything harder. No punctuation, no name. Just the tone of someone who believed silence was compliance. Below it, a stack of letters, ones I'd written and never sent. Some addressed to myself, others to names I hadn't said out loud in years. I used to think if I worded things precisely enough, someone would finally understand. But precision doesn't guarantee being heard. Only that you spoke clearly. One letter ended with, "I'm not trying to be seen anymore. I'm just trying to stop disappearing." The pen had dug into the page. I hadn't meant to press so hard. I opened my laptop. The screen flickered, then defaulted to the photo gallery. The Shared With You folder had new additions. A picture of Mom with Savannah at a public event, Savannah holding an award. The caption read, "Grateful for strong women and stronger families." I didn't recognize the room they were in. I didn't tap to enlarge, just selected the entire folder and moved it to trash. When the confirmation appeared, "Are you sure you want to delete 118 items?" I pressed yes. It didn't feel final, just necessary. I changed the name on my iCloud account, removed the middle initial, reset my passcode, logged out of every group chat, except the one with Megan, the only one who had ever noticed when I went quiet. The Bennett family thread blinked once, showing unread messages, Mom's link to a gala invitation, Savannah's reply with a thumbs-up emoji, and a forwarded article from a local paper. No one asked where I'd gone, just kept talking around the absence. I tapped leave conversation. When the second confirmation asked again, I didn't hesitate. In the kitchen, the cabinet above the sink held the only photograph still on display. It was from West Point, my graduation. The frame had yellowed slightly, and one corner was chipped from the last move. In the photo, my posture was exact the uniform pressed. Savannah stood beside me, not in uniform, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder, like it belonged there. Her smile had been caught mid-laugh. The memory didn't match the photograph. She had arrived late that day. Mom had fussed over her shoes, not my commissioning pin. Dad hadn't come. The only person who hugged me was my CO. I removed the frame. No glass cracked. Nothing broke. I placed it face down in the drawer with the batteries and expired coupons. On the same hook, I pinned a folded map of Seattle, creased, faded, impersonal. It didn't name me. It didn't expect me. The only thing I added was a small red sticker to mark my street. Not the building, not the apartment number, just the general area. That felt like enough. Later that night, I pulled the towel back down from the rack and folded it differently, just to change something. On the corner of my desk, I placed the envelope of letters and tied it with a new strip of gauze. Clean. Unused. My phone buzzed once. A notification from a calendar I hadn't updated Savannah's promotion anniversary. I deleted it. I opened a blank email. No greeting. No subject. To Elaine Bennett, Savannah Bennett. Message: I won't come to places I'm not invited. No sign-off. No request. Just a line. Just air. Cleared. Not claimed. I pressed send. Nothing bounced. No reply returned. Just a quiet confirmation message sent. The rest of the night was ordinary. I boiled water for tea and forgot to drink it. I folded laundry and didn't put it away. I looked at the map again and liked that it didn't ask questions. I didn't light a candle, didn't write in my journal, didn't do anything symbolic. But, for the first time in years, I heard my own name in my head without flinching, and I knew that silence wasn't absence. It was presence refused and reclaimed. Some walls don't echo back the past, and that alone makes them worth living in. The floor creaked only once right below the window ledge, where I set the kettle each morning. It wasn't the groan of age, but something gentler, like the floorboards had learned to breathe. My new apartment sat 3 floors up, narrow and square, with no corridor wide enough for heirlooms, and no shelf made to hold family portraits. It didn't matter. Nothing came with me except a cardboard box of notebooks, a cast-iron teapot, and a folded quilt with stitched initials that weren't mine. The table by the window wasn't polished. It had a faint knife mark across the surface, the kind that showed someone once used it to cut bread too carelessly. I didn't mind. I traced the line with the edge of my thumb while the tea steeped, letting the leaves settle without a spoon. On the wall above my desk, there were no paintings, no certificates. Just pinned notes on craft paper. Short sentences. Tactical outlines. Fragments of thoughts scribbled in black ink like the bones of a language only I could read. I used to write them for others' reports, edits, ideas lifted and presented as someone else's. Here, I didn't need an audience. The pen I used wasn't elegant. It left a scratchy sound on paper, a noise I had begun to enjoy. The wardrobe didn't hold much. A blazer for meetings, 2 dresses folded carefully, worn but not tired. I hadn't bought anything new since the rooftop. I wasn't waiting for an occasion anymore. There were no dinners marked on my calendar, no anniversaries, no reminders in red ink. Each morning I turned on the kettle and swept the floor in bare feet. The broom bristles had a rhythm to them, soft then sharp against the corner. The repetition wasn't routine. It was proof of presence. I was here. I was cleaning only after myself. No spilled soda on silk. No invisible footprints to erase. Damon called once every few days. He never used my name first. Just started with silence, then the sound of traffic behind him. Once I heard someone laugh and ask, "Is that her?" He didn't respond. I didn't ask us. We didn't mention the promotion party. Not the soda. Not the scarf he handed me, or the look in his eyes that night. We spoke like people who shared something that no longer required maintenance. Not broken. Not intact. Just still. "Do you sleep well there?" he asked one evening. "Well enough. I always imagined you'd choose somewhere brighter." "I didn't choose it. It was just available." There was a pause. "You sound quiet." "There's no need to raise my voice anymore." That was all. In the afternoon, I stood on the balcony with the chipped railing and watched the sidewalk below. The women passed in clumps, 2 with strollers, one dragging a canvas bag, another holding her heels in hand while speaking into her phone. They didn't walk like they needed to be seen. Their hair was unstyled, their clothes ordinary. One of them paused to lean against the fence and sip water from a cracked thermos. Her eyes were closed. No one noticed her. That moment stayed longer than it should have. Inside, I had no clock on the wall. Just the sound of water cooling. I folded laundry without music. I kept receipts in a tin box, not labeled. And the window always open, let it in a breeze that carried no scent I could name. There were no books about healing, no mantras written in cursive, only the quiet satisfaction of objects left in the right place, the spoon back in the drawer. The light switched off from the hallway. The coat hung up, even when there was no rain. I hadn't spoken to Savannah. She sent a message once, a photo of her at a conference with 2 lines of text. Guess who they asked about today? I didn't open it. The notification faded on its own. Mom emailed a forwarded article about resilience through family bonds. I archived it. Not deleted. Just not opened. I visited the post office and changed my address officially. There was a form where you had to list if others lived with you. I left it blank. The clerk didn't question it. I liked her for that. The best part of the new place was the lack of echo. My old apartment, still half-furnished closer to downtown, held on to voices longer than it should have. I once dropped a metal spoon in the sink, and the ring of sound clung to the corners like something haunting. Here, the noise stopped. When I stopped moving. The stillness belonged to me. At night, I sat on the floor beside the window with a mug of barley tea and reread old field reports. The military ones. I didn't miss the uniform, just the clarity of mission, the way you knew exactly what your role was even if no one acknowledged it, even if they replaced your name on the final slide. I found an old notebook at the bottom of the drawer, its spine barely intact. Inside, a single sentence circled twice. Truth doesn't need applause, just room to exist. That night, I didn't light a candle. I didn't play music. I didn't pour a drink. I just sat beside the kettle and let the water go cold. And in the morning, I opened a new page in my journal and wrote one line. I no longer need anyone to validate my worth. I only need to not let them erase it again. Some silences come dressed like apologies, but they arrive only to clear a path for something else. The message came without a name at the bottom. Just, "Can you come home this weekend?" No punctuation. No warmth. The sender ID still read, Mom Bennett, though I had changed her contact photo to a blank circle months ago. I stared at the message long enough for the screen to dim. When I tapped it back awake, the text still sat there, unblinking. Below it, the auto-suggestion offered, "Sure, maybe what's up?" I typed my own reply instead. "What's going on?" The call came before I could lock the phone again. I let it ring twice, then answered. Her voice had the carefully arranged tone of someone trying to sound informal. "It's nothing dramatic," she started. "We're having a small get-together. Family. Savannah's organizing it. She thought it would be good optics if we all showed unity." I didn't respond. She continued, "You know how people talk. It wouldn't look right if one of us wasn't there, especially now that Savannah's representing more public interests. She's the face of a lot of what we've built." She paused like she expected agreement. "So, can we count on you to be presentable, as if I were a stain she hoped would remain out of frame unless scrubbed clean." I looked down at my hand fingers, unconsciously rubbing the spine of a closed journal. On the cover was a tiny scratch that had never smoothed out a mark from the day I dropped it during a field brief in Kandahar. It was the last entry I'd written before losing my platoon leader. I didn't open it anymore, but I never put it away. Her voice returned. "You don't have to do much. Just be polite. Smile. It's about showing stability. Savannah's launching her legacy program soon, and we don't want any stories that might distract from that." That was when she slipped. Not with anger, not with force, but with calculation too thin to hold. "She needs this to look seamless. You understand? Investors like consistency. A strong family brand." I ended the call without a word. The phone sat face down for the rest of the evening. Later that week, a folder appeared in my inbox. It was labeled "Confidential, for your eyes only," from someone I hadn't spoken to since my discharge. The email body was blank. No greeting, no sign-off. Inside the folder were slides, decks, mock-ups of Savannah's upcoming personal branding initiative. In the corner of one page, I spotted a graphic I knew too well, a 3-tier resilience model with a phased re-entry path for post-conflict zones. It was something I had drafted in 2017 while stationed abroad during a week of dust storms and failed transmissions. I had handwritten it in a notebook before transferring it to digital formats. The arrows were the same. Even the color code matched my navy ash ochre. Another slide quoted a passage I had once read aloud during a remote unit debrief, a line I had written for myself but shared out loud. "Once visibility does not always equal value, but absence is often mistaken for failure." There it was, now centered in bold, attributed to the Bennett leadership ethos. I clicked through the metadata. All files had been downloaded from a shared server where Damon and I once collaborated. The author field had been modified last month. His name was still on the server logs, but mine had been replaced. I didn't call him. I didn't need to. Later, when we met for tea at the corner place, we both pretended wasn't a ritual. He placed a small flash drive on the table without speaking. Its label read, "Restore Access." He stirred his cup once and left it untouched. In my apartment that night, I laid everything on the table: printouts, notes, even my old sketchbook from West Point that still carried the indentation of my handwriting. I didn't arrange them neatly. I wanted to see the mess, the theft, the neat erasure of my name in favor of a polished campaign slogan. I printed only the most damning materials. I slid them into a red folder, matte, clean, unmarked. Not to send, just to exist. I placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, not as a weapon, as a mirror. The next morning I received another message. "It would mean a lot if you were there." This time there was a signature Savannah. It was the first direct contact from her in 11 months. I stared at the period at the end of her sentence. It didn't look like an invitation. It looked like a lever. No apology. No question. Just a nudge for convenience. I opened my calendar and marked the date anyway. Not to attend. just to remember what silence costs. When I walked past my mirror later, I caught my reflection holding a folder under one arm, lips pressed flat. I didn't look confrontational. I looked whole. I didn't reply. I didn't delete her message either. Instead, I took one of the original sketches from my notebook, the very first draft of the model they had rebranded, and pinned it on the corkboard behind my desk. I used a black pin. No colour, just weight. The drawing was crooked. I left it that way. That night, I washed my teacup 3 times before leaving it to dry. The pattern on its rim had faded in one spot from use. I ran my finger over it once. Then I turned off the light. I no longer needed to explain what had been mine. I only needed to stop letting them take it. I used to think distance would blur things, but some outlines only sharpen with time. The mug I used that morning had a faint chip on the rim, the kind that didn't cut, only reminded. Steam rose slowly from the coffee. I didn't sweeten it. Seattle's fog clung to the edges of the balcony, but I opened the door anyway. Damp air pressed against my skin. I stood there, barefoot, the hem of my pajama pants brushing the cool tile. On the railing, a single crow watched me from the next building, its head tilted. It didn't move. Neither did I. The email had arrived just after midnight, a formal invitation from the board subject line, clipped short, request for internal review. I didn't click it right away. Instead, I had made a list. Not of points to defend, not of what I had lost, but of the names I had reclaimed. One of them was mine. The printer coughed out documents 1 page at a time. Not urgent, not noisy. I didn't staple them. I placed each into a soft leather folio, the kind I used to see in Savannah's briefcase, but never owned myself. This one I bought 2 months ago. No monogram, no initials. On the cover page, Proprietary, Framework, Adaptive Strategy Modules. Author Eliza Bennett. In bold, not hidden in footnotes, not a shared document. I declined the meeting request from the PR division without hesitation. The message had read, "Would you be open to lending input again, off record?" My response was 1 sentence long. I do not contribute anonymously anymore. They didn't reply. By 10 a.m., I had already led the first workshop. 5 women, 3 in their late 30s, 2 in their 50s. 1 used a cane, 1 never made eye contact. All of them carried the same invisible thing I used to hold doubt, shaped like discipline. The handouts were plain, no logos. The final page had a simple prompt, "What do you know now that no one taught you?" They sat with it longer than I expected. So did I. Afterward, I stayed behind to clean the whiteboard. Someone had drawn a triangle in the corner with the words, "Don't apologize for taking up space," written beside it. I left it there. Back at home, I changed into a grey blouse and straight-cut pants. Neutral, not borrowed. I clipped my hair up, not tight, not styled, just out of my way. On the kitchen counter sat a folded dish towel I'd never used. White linen still creased from the package. I didn't know why I hadn't thrown it away. That morning I wiped the counter with it. Damon arrived around noon unannounced, but expected. He didn't knock loudly, just once, knuckles soft against the door frame. He carried something tucked under his arm, flat, wrapped in craft paper. When I opened the door, he didn't step in right away. He just looked at me, then at the mug in my hand. "You're up early?" I nodded. He handed me the package, no tape, no card. Inside was a wooden plaque, hand-sanded letters carved shallow but deliberate, built, not borrowed. He didn't stay. We didn't sit. He looked around the apartment at the walls with no pictures, the bookshelf with more notebooks than novels, and smiled. You did it. He didn't mean the teaching, or the meeting, or even the documents. He meant the space, the stillness, the decision to make room without waiting for someone to ask me to. I placed the plaque on the shelf next to a single blue glass vase. Empty, not waiting for flowers. Later that day, while reviewing edits on a policy draft, I saw my name again, this time in the prepared by section of the community center's internal memo. Not initials, not EB. The full name. I didn't correct it. I didn't shrink it. That night, I returned to the balcony. Same crow. This time it flew away as I opened the door. I didn't mind. I made one more pot of tea. Chamomile. No sugar. I watched the steam rise from the cup and settle near the windowsill. Then I retrieved the leather folio from my desk, zipped it closed, and slipped it into the outer pocket of my bag. My reflection caught briefly in the glass door, still the same posture, still the same jaw. But something quieter behind the eyes. I didn't speak aloud, didn't narrate what I felt. There was no audience. The next morning, I would walk into that boardroom without an invitation to apologize, without an agenda to plead. I would not slam files or name names or cite hurt-like evidence. I would speak because the work was mine. Because I had done it. Because silence wasn't my only tool anymore. And I would sit perhaps not at the head of the table, but knowing the grain of wood beneath my fingers wasn't borrowed space. This wasn't the moment I reclaimed a seat. It was the moment I started building the table. Letting go didn't come as a rush, it arrived more like the absence of a question. I used the pen with the faded gold clip, not for sentiment, just habit. The ink flowed evenly, the nib dragging across the paper with a quiet insistence. Each line held steady, no crossings out, no second drafts. The paper was thick ivory, slightly textured. I chose it because it didn't wrinkle easily. I didn't pause between sentences. The words weren't rehearsed. They had waited quietly, pressing against the inside of my ribs for years. And now, without ceremony, they settled into shape. I began the letter without greeting. No names. Just the space where names would have been. I don't carry anger. Only clarity. My handwriting was smaller than usual. Composed, narrow strokes, controlled margins. I didn't apologize. I didn't recount old scenes. I didn't trace the history of dinners. I wasn't invited to promotions I was erased from, or the feeling of walking into rooms where no one noticed me leave. I am no longer available to cushion the weight of your silence. I folded the copies of the property deeds and clipped them with a brass fastener. The corner bore my signature, clear, dry ink, notarized a year ago. The house in Tacoma, the one with the blue shutters and the lemon tree I'd planted as a housewarming gift, had been transferred months ago, without my consent. Savannah's name now appeared where mine once was. I didn't contest it. I kept the original transfer agreement. I had never shown it to anyone before. I am not reclaiming what you took, but I will no longer pretend I gave it freely. The envelope was white, thick-backed, unlined. No monogram, no return address. I sealed it with one long press of my thumb, flattening the glue edge slowly, deliberately. The wax seal kit remained unopened in the drawer. I hadn't used it in years. Inside I included only what mattered, the letter, the deed, and a postscript. I don't need acknowledgement, just distance. I didn't dress for the walk. No coat, though the wind had begun to rise slightly. The hem of my sweater curled where the stitching had loosened. I pulled it once, then let it go. The mailbox at the corner had chipped red paint along the top lip. A single sticker near the base read, "Pickup times vary." I stood for a moment before lifting the slot. The envelope made a soft sound as it dropped, a hush more than a thud, the kind of sound doors make when they're closed not out of anger but finality. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check the street. I turned and began walking back with the same steps I'd used to leave. There had been no reaction to my last message weeks ago, not when I declined the dinner, not when I didn't reply to Savannah's press release. The silence had stretched long and clean. This time I let it stay. I passed the neighbor's yard on the way home. A child's toy plastic sun-bleached lay tipped on its side. A pinwheel on the fence turned lazily with the wind. I stopped briefly watching its uneven rhythm. Nothing in nature moved in perfect circles. Back in the apartment, I poured the last of the tea into a chipped ceramic cup I never served guests with. I sat on the floor instead of the chair. The angle of the room looked different from there, less decorated, more honest. The file drawer in my desk remained open. Inside were the originals documents with my full name, dated emails, old strategy memos with my annotations still visible in the margins. I didn't reach for them, just closed the drawer quietly. On the shelf beside the door, a single metal key lay next to a folded note I'd written to myself months ago. Stay only where you're not expected to vanish. I read it once, not aloud. The paper had curled slightly at the edge from humidity. I didn't smooth it. There was no celebration. No marker of triumph. No call to Damon. He would know without asking. He always had. This wasn't an ending meant to be shared. It was a punctuation, a soft full stop, placed at the end of a chapter no longer worth editing. They might never open the envelope. They might discard it unopened, or skim and dismiss and laugh quietly at the tone. That didn't matter. The act was not for them. It was for the woman who used to pause before speaking, who used to soften her presence to fit inside a room that was never built with her in mind, for the one who used to wonder if absence would make anyone notice. I stood at the window after holding the cup with both hands. No rings, just the imprint the handle left on my finger. Outside, the crow from days before didn't return. The sky was blank. A small branch leaned against the balcony railing. I didn't move it. There was nothing left to explain. No version of the story that hadn't already been lived. No weight I needed to hold in case someone else couldn't bear it. I had not mailed my grief. I had mailed my refusal to carry it any longer. Some doors don't need to be slammed, they just need not be opened again. Some mornings feel less like beginnings and more like quiet confirmations. The kettle gave off a soft hum, not rushed. I placed the tea bag white to tea with lemongrass into the chipped porcelain cup I'd kept from my time overseas. The handle had a faint hairline crack along the curve, thin as a thread someone forgot to snip. I didn't fix it. The apartment sat on the third floor just high enough to catch a clean slice of light between the buildings across the street. The windows weren't large, but the glass didn't fog the way the old place used to. I didn't open them. The warmth inside held. The notebook on the table wasn't new. The cover had softened at the corners. Inside, no numbered lists, no checkboxes, no plans, just lines of things I once thought I had to carry. A forgotten birthday, the sound of her heels in the hallway, the way my father looked away when I saluted him at graduation. I flipped it open to the last page and added one more entry. Letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means I don't need to explain it anymore. There were no missed calls, no notifications, My mother hadn't replied to the letter. Savannah hadn't tagged me in any press updates. Damon hadn't sent another article from the PR circuit, though he once would have. I didn't refresh their pages. I hadn't searched their names in weeks. The bookmarks were gone, cleared in a quiet sweep one night, while waiting for laundry to finish. I hadn't looked back. It wasn't silence out of pride. It was simply space. I walked to the door and opened the small metal box mounted just beside the frame. The label, E. Bennett had dulled to a dusty bronze over time. I peeled it off with a flat edge from the letter opener, careful not to scratch the surface. Underneath was smooth and clean, untouched since installation. From the drawer, I retrieved a small engraved plate. Brass. Matte. Finish. It read only E.B., no full name. No need for one. I pressed it into place and stepped back. The adhesive would hold. It always did, once you stopped trying to move it again. Later, I climbed to the rooftop garden with a small terracotta pot wrapped in an old dish towel. Inside was a single sage plant, its leaves soft with a silvery sheen. The women at the community center had pooled seedlings together last week, gifting them to each other with handwritten tags. Mine didn't have one. I preferred it that way. The sun hadn't burned through the haze, but the breeze was enough to carry scent. Distant rosemary, hints of cement and paint from a nearby unit being remodeled. I knelt and pressed the soil into a deep corner, repotting the sage in a wider space. It sat firm, quiet. A neighbor from the end unit leaned against the railing. "What kind is that sage?" I answered, tightening the last bit of soil around the base. "Cleans out what others leave behind." She didn't reply, just nodded and turned toward the stairwell again. I remained there a while. Dirt under my fingernails. The wind combing strands of hair loose from behind my ear. The kind of stillness that asks for nothing, not even acknowledgement. At home, I wiped my hands on a cotton cloth and opened the fridge. The old photograph remained tucked beneath a magnet shaped like a small mountain. I hadn't removed it. The edges were slightly curled now. 2 girls at a beach, barefoot, tangled hair, one holding a kite string, the other shielding her eyes from the sun. Savannah stood taller, even then. I was half-turned as if already bracing for something. I looked at the image without flinching. For the first time, I didn't try to decode it, didn't try to locate the fault line. That wasn't a story. It was a picture. 2 children. One would grow up believing the world bent toward her voice. The other would spend years learning not to disappear beneath it. I moved the magnet slightly so it held tighter, not to protect the image, just to keep it from sliding. That evening, I brewed a second cup, not tea this time, but warm water with lemon. A habit Damon had left behind, and I'd kept. The mug was different. White ceramic, no print, no past. It held its heat longer. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check emails. I didn't write. I didn't speak. The apartment breathed softly, the way spaces do when no one is measuring them. The envelope from the board meeting still sat untouched on the console by the door. I would attend. I had the documentation. But I didn't rehearse what I'd say. They'd listen or they wouldn't. The outcome no longer shaped the value of my name. On the bookshelf, a metal bookmark peeked from a novel I hadn't finished. I left it where it was, not because I intended to go back to it, but because I hiked where I had stopped. I wiped the sink clean before turning out the lights. The hum of the building quieted with the night. No horns, no footfalls. Just the mechanical tick of the clock above the oven, counting nothing urgent. At the window, The reflection caught me in profile shoulders, relaxed, chin even. I didn't shift to look directly. I let it be partial, somewhere below a car door closed, distant, unimportant. I didn't write a journal entry. I didn't text a friend. I didn't wait for anything. I no longer need them to see how far I've come, only to live quietly enough that no one else gets to rewrite what belongs to me.